After a long career covering a variety of C-level marketing roles within a number of prestigious media companies and well-known brands, Chris Lawson decided it was time for a change. He saw a gap in the market where his wealth of experience could be valuable to companies that were unable to engage a full-time chief marketing officer. He formed Moreno Marketing and began offering his services as a CMO for hire. A year later, Chris set about creating and delivering a series of podcasts with long-term friend Sam Money. Across the Pond has just completed its fourth series, over which time it has helped educate marketers at all stages of their career. In today's episode, I talked to Chris to see how he's been getting on. So Chris, it's good to meet a fellow podcaster, although you and your colleague Samuel Money have been hosting Across the Pond for a lot longer than I've been doing it. What was it that stimulated the desire to start up a podcast channel?
Yeah, hi John. It's great to be here. Sam and I, we thought about it for a while. I wanted to do a podcast and find a way of sort of giving something back, thinking around how I could help sort of share some of the experiences. And talking to Sam, that was very similar to what he wanted to do as well. So we thought about we'd give it a go. That's over a year ago now. Time flies.
This year has gone completely nuts anyway because of COVID, but it all seems very strange. How did you meet Samuel?
So Sam and I used to work together a long time ago now. Probably we're talking about like 1998. So that totally dates me, maybe even a little bit earlier. That was in Safeway retailers, now sort of taken over by Morrison.
That was my first Saturday job.
Was it really? There you go.
Yeah, working at Safeways, yes.
And Sam worked in category management, which was the sort of future thinking around retail at the time. And I was working in relationship marketing, which was sort of future thinking about marketing techniques, which obviously then evolved into direct marketing, digital marketing, sort of CRM and the like, really. But very, very early days. So we were at the forefront of what we were doing. Also a love of football and beer.
Well, that always brings people together, doesn't it? In the last couple of years, since leaving Virgin Wines, I think it was, you've positioned yourself as a CMO for hire. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was something that I'd been thinking about probably for the last few years of when I was in full-time CMO positions. I can trace it right back to when I was sort of CMO of The Guardian. Well, even before that, Absolute Radio, to be honest. So I was brand director at Absolute Radio. That was a transformation project, really, in essence. How do we move from being Virgin Radio to Absolute Radio? Guardian, which was probably the largest, highest profile role that I did, sort of being CMO there, was looking at how do we move Guardian from being a newsstand, predominantly newsstand operation, into something with membership and subscription at the heart of it. And obviously you see that at the base of the Guardian today. Then I went into gaming. Then I went to Virgin Wines and a few other bits and pieces in between. But all of those were transformation projects. All of those were about how do you move an organization successfully from point A to point B. And that's the bit I love doing. That's the bit that I add value in. It's not really about running a sort of a steady state marketing team for sort of 6-7 years. It's very much about helping those organizations transform. And I thought, what better way to do that than actually set up on my own? And that's what I've done. I think the other point to mention, which I'm sort of quite a believer in, having worked in the sort of software technology industry in gaming for about 3 or 4 years, what also was really apparent to me is that the whole of the tech industry sort of moves towards that freelance outsourced model. And I see no reason really why marketing will not be moving there. And again, I wanted to make sure I was ahead of that curve.
So what excites you about being an interim?
Wow, that's a good question. I think the way that I see it is I can come in, quickly analyze and assess the situation, roll my sleeves up and get executional as well as sort of strategizing at board level and make a difference fast. And sadly, unfortunately, when you start to become part of the establishment, whether you're part of a full-time team, you end up getting distracted from the core task that you've been asked to do. politics starts to play a part, meetings definitely starts to play a part, administration and the like. Whilst I can actually focus very much on what is the number one thing that needs to happen, and make sure that all of my energies and all of the team's energies are focused on that and not distracted. So I love that focus. I love that sort of practical nature, and that objectivity that you can get from sort of coming in as well. And ultimately seeing success, John. That's really the measure. The measure is actually the fact that they don't need you anymore. That's when you know you've done a good job.
So that methodology of being on the outside looking in, and with that comes the power and ability to tell it like it is, I suppose. Have you ever suffered from any of the decisions that you've made of being too harsh, for instance?
Yep, I think so. Without naming any names, there's an uncomfortable truth, which is, yeah, actually, I'd say the majority of organisations that I've worked for, they want to know the truth. They want to understand what is going on within their organisation in order to make it better. Yeah, and their measure of success of making it better may well be acquisition growth or retention or top line or bottom line, whatever it is. And that's my role in order to do that. But quite often there may be some preconceived ideas as to what is going wrong and where the issues are. And quite a lot, it comes down to leadership and culture, what I find. At the heart of pretty much everything that we do is that cultural part. And culture tends to start with the founder, tends to start with the organization as a whole. And my goal is to help provide that clarity and that impact. So sometimes there's some tough conversations to be had with founders and CEOs, and just go, do you know what? You've actually got your maths wrong. And or alternatively, what you've done is that you're assuming the organization feels one thing and they actually feel something quite different. Now, I haven't been, gladly I can say I haven't been in a situation where any projects haven't taken their way forward. I've always managed to navigate that with a CEO or founder in a time, but they're tough conversations, but that's the role, really.
Yeah, it's a bit like calling your baby ugly, isn't it?
There
One of
is
those
that.
things. But that leadership and culture is often ingrained in a business. It must be really challenging to make a shift in culture.
It is, and it's also challenging to do it in a short time scale. And it's challenging to do it when you're remote as well, as we're all finding it now, rather than being able to look in the whites of eyes of the employees and be there day in, day out, which is just not a possibility. So I think the philosophy that I've got is that it isn't about me making a change. It's about the organization making a change. It's about empowering the organization to affect change. So that's about providing some sort of guide rails, some frameworks to work within. Like I say, holding up a mirror to both the sort of CEO and the teams in terms of where their real potential is and where the opportunity is, and calling out any sort of area that isn't really authentic. And then it is about practicalities. It's giving good examples, and by doing that, by focusing on the brand, focusing on the product or service that needs affecting, and organizing a new working model around that. So it is possible. And I think one of the other things that I found, having worked at some huge organizations such as Virgin or Guardian or Bauer, the media sort of company, and then working at some startups which have got a bit more of a can-do attitude and go, do you know what? We haven't got 9 months. We've got 9 days. How are we going to get this done? So bringing some of that startup mentality into some established players, I think, is also important.
So just touching a little bit on your kind of CV here, you mentioned a couple of names there: Bauer Media, Absolute Radio, Guardian News, lots and lots of media companies. You would think actually that you would have sustained your career further on and stayed in that media-centric kind of organization, yet you made the choice to move to a gaming company. Why was that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very conscious choice, but it wasn't an immediate one, to be honest. I came out of the Guardian, completely proud of what I've achieved, but I'd sort of spent 12 years at the sort of top level.
You're listening to the shortened version of this podcast. To listen to the full version, visit your favourite podcast player and search for Webtrends Optimize or The Big Lift.